All right, let's just dive right into it. Welcome to today's explainer, folks. Engaged couples, brave friends, designated helpers, we are looking at the absolute biggest production of your lives, your wedding. And planning a wedding, well, as you probably know, it's not just about picking out pretty colors or tasting cake. It is a massive, real-world logistical feat. In fact, if you look at the resources out there, they consistently compare this milestone to producing a full-blown theatrical event. So today, we're going to use the best insights available to make sure you are totally ready to call the shots and, more importantly, actually enjoy the final show.
To keep things totally manageable, we're breaking the logistics of this massive event down into 5 acts. 1. Mapping timeline and budget. 2. Dodging common planning mistakes. 3. The wedding coordinator's role. 4. Perfecting your wedding rehearsal. And 5. Crafting your processional order. Let's get to work. All right, Act 1. Mapping timeline and budget. Let's start with the absolute foundation of any successful production, securing your funding and establishing a rock-solid shooting schedule. Before you do anything else, you need a map.
Now, what's really fascinating here is exactly where your money goes. Looking at this budget breakdown from the Zilli Hospitality Group, it shows that a staggering 50% of your total budget immediately goes to the reception venue, food, and service. Yeah, half of your funds, right off the top. The rest, it gets carved up into smaller 10% slices for things like your attire, floral decor, and music. Understanding this macro-level math early on is absolutely crucial, just so you aren't completely blindsided when that catering bill finally arrives.
Once the money is mapped out, you really need to look at the macro view of your timeline. You got to hit these major milestones way before the big day. We're talking 12 months out to set the budget and hunt for that venue. By 9 months, you're locking in caterers and florists. 6 months out, you are researching your marriage license requirements. Seriously, do not leave the legal stuff to the last minute. And by 1 month out, you're finalizing that minute-by-minute timeline for the day itself. Putting that early hustle into practice literally means starting critical pre-production tasks almost a full year in advance. Based on recommendations from Zola, this includes setting up a dedicated wedding email and Google Drive to, keep your sanity. Locking in that budget talk we just discussed, and finally, booking the venue. You simply cannot put these off.
Moving right along to Section 2, dodging common planning mistakes. Because even the most organized couples can run into trouble if they aren't paying attention. So let's look at the missteps that can quickly derail your production.
EventBay warns us of a very, very common mistake: waiting too long to secure key vendors. This leads to extremely limited availability and, honestly, shockingly high costs. So the crucial takeaway here is to lock in your photographer, caterer, and venue 9 to 12 months out. The wedding industry moves unbelievably fast, and the best talent books up sometimes a year or more in advance. Here is another massive mistake: falling in love with a gorgeous space before you actually know your head count. We see this all the time, right? A couple books a romantic, intimate barn, only to realize later their families are demanding a 200-person guest list of second cousins you haven't seen since childhood. EventBay notes that this almost always guarantees a stressful seating nightmare later. Always draft the guest list first. That ensures your dream venue can actually comfortably fit your reality.
You also want to avoid these 3 massive stress inducers. First up, ignoring weather backups for an outdoor wedding. Always have a tent or an indoor plan ready to go. Second, skimping on buffer time for getting ready. Hair and makeup inevitably take longer than you think, and that delays the whole day. And third, taking on the crushing burden of trying to do everything yourself. Which leads us perfectly into our next crucial topic.
Section 3. The wedding coordinator's role. Trying to DIY everything is just a recipe for disaster, which is exactly why you need to hire the ultimate hero of your production, the wedding coordinator. Looking at this breakdown from Zola, you can literally see how a coordinator's value wildly escalates as you get closer to the wedding. A month out, they are saving you hours by managing RSVPs and finalizing that day of timeline. The day before, they're wrangling documents and running the rehearsal. And on the actual day of the show, they are the ultimate timekeepers. They track the rings, they track the license, and most importantly, they put out invisible fires so subtly that you and your guests never even know a problem occurred.
By the time you reach that final week, your coordinator formally steps in. You have that final handoff meeting, you hand over the vendor details, the emergency kit items, the final catering numbers, the whole shebang. From this point on, they run the show. This allows you to actually breathe, pack for your honeymoon, and, get a decent night's sleep. All right, Section 4, perfecting your wedding rehearsal. Let's move to the day before the wedding and see how your coordinator takes charge of the rehearsal.
We want this to be quick, efficient, and typically an hour or less because you have a rehearsal dinner to get to.
I absolutely love this quote from DPNAC events because it perfectly frames the ceremony as a theatrical performance. Act 1 is everyone walking in. Act 2 is the ceremony. Act 3 is everyone walking out. This mindset keeps your wedding party completely aligned on their roles and removes the confusion of where they need to be and when. Now, counterintuitively, the experts at DPNA say the best way to rehearse this play is totally out of order. You start in Act 2. You physically place everyone where they will eventually end up standing at the altar. That way everyone knows their final mark. Then, from that position, you practice Act 3, leaving and walking back up the aisle. Finally, once they know where they're going, you regroup and practice Act 1, walking in. It is a brilliant time-saving strategy. Seriously, a real game changer. And that brings us to Section 5, crafting your processional order. This is the grand finale of your logistical planning, figuring out who walks down the aisle and in what order. This can be surprisingly stressful for couples.
Here is the standard, traditional processional template outlined by efficient Lisa Hunter. It serves as a really great tested baseline to start from if you just aren't sure what to do. It starts with the groom or first partner, followed by the wedding party paired up, then the key players like the maid of honor and best man, the kids if you have them, and finally the big reveal of the bride, often accompanied by a parent.
But please, do not feel locked into that traditional list. As Officiant Lisa notes, modern weddings offer endless, amazing variations to fit your actual life. We are seeing grooms walking in escorted by both parents, same-sex couples and even brides and grooms choosing to walk the aisle side by side to emphasize their partnership. You can have a dedicated handler bring your dog down the aisle. Or, hey, you can just skip having a wedding party entirely if that's what feels right to you. The ultimate golden rule of the processional is simple. Ditch what you feel you are supposed to do, or what a quick internet search tells you is traditional. Simply choose the order that brings you the most joy. It's your production, right? So cast it exactly how you want.
Because after all the logistical hurdles are cleared, the vendors are paid, the timeline is set, and the stage is perfectly dressed, you have to ensure you avoid the biggest planning mistake of all, Event Bay listed as mistake number 10, getting so caught up in the details that the day literally becomes a blur. You've directed a beautiful 3-act play. Now, amidst the budgets, timelines, and rehearsals, how are you going to make sure you actually stop, breathe, and soak in the magic of your own production? I'll leave you to think on that. Thanks for learning with me today.